Hi, I'm Chris, and we made it to episode 3. I'm here again today with Rob, and we talked in episode 1 about permission marketing, door knocking in particular, and then into episode 2 we talked about competition, whether it's damaging the reputation of a estate agency. Today we're going to ask one particular question. It's a question that doesn't really get asked much by vendors of their agents, and it's also a question that the agents themselves don't articulate their answer very well or very concisely. That question really is, what do you do? And the perception really among homeowners is that agents are there to sell their homes. That's all they do. The process is quite complicated. There are a lot more layers to actually achieving that result, and we'll dig in right away with Rob in terms of what actually do agents do, or what is his definition of what agents do. So Rob, welcome again today. Great to have the opportunity to talk to you. And that's the question, what do agents do?
Hello, Chris. It's good to see you again. And I think there's a big misconception. There's a big difference between an estate agent and a property broker. Firstly, that's what I'd like to address, because the estate agent is the shop, right? The property broker is the individual that's working for the shop. And I think just because you've had a bad experience with an estate agent before, you can't tar them all with the same brush. So you need to be able to give these people an opportunity. But that then goes back to these ridiculously long contracts, which we should discuss at another time. In terms of a property broker, what we do, the reality is we are there to give them truthful, honest, communicative advice in order to say to them, my job here is for you to trust me. It's a two-way street. I trust you, but I'm going to put your house on the market to get you the best price possible, as quick as I possibly can. But you need to take my advice in the fact that I'm only as good as your conveyancer and your surveyor and your mortgage broker and your buyer. That's it. If I have a weak link in the chain or within this communication, then we are going to have problems. And I just looked at, I think the issue that I have with them is I have no problem in sending an email to someone to say that I'm going to be charging them £760,000 to sell their property, right? Which to me is, I believe conveyancers should charge more money, or actually property lawyers should charge more money, because it's a conveyor belt system. Some go through, some don't. That's the truth of it. But our job as a property broker is to give you the best marketing, the best advice, be at the end of the phone, be able to be proactive and reactive, but also to make sure you're there to chase the conveyancers, chase the surveyors, the mortgage brokers, the chain, literally just so you can pass the information back to the client that you're selling the property for, but ultimately too, if you've got the whole chain. So the biggest stumbling block you have, and you say I'm in the industry 20 years, I started off in the corporate world where you use the financial services that they have and you use the conveyances that you have, even though they're not particularly great, you're targeted on them. And if you don't hit your targets, you lose your job, which effectively why I decided to go out on my own near enough 2014 I think it was. So the job in itself is really quite straightforward. We don't sell houses. I've never sold a house. We're just there to negotiate the best price possible. And actually on that, Chris, not every house is for you, because like I say, it's a two-way street. If you're not going to get on with a client at the very beginning, you can guarantee you're probably not going to get off at the end. So you'd rather walk away from it, save yourself the headache. So that's where I'm at with it.
In terms of communication, I mean, you mentioned communication there, and sending emails and making phone calls to conveyancers and solicitors and the client. The communication aspect is critical, really, keeping everyone in the loop. And it's a shameless plug, but I mean, we're on a platform now called WidiWham, and they really have dedicated workspaces where everyone can be involved in terms of the conveyancer can be there, the solicitor can be there, the property broker, the client can be there. So it's a dedicated space where everyone can communicate in a safe space. Do you think that's a good idea, that everyone is on the same page, and it's not a matter of saying, okay, well, I have to ring up the conveyancer tomorrow. The conveyancer knows what's going on because he's actually involved in the chat, he's involved in the video conferencing, he's involved in all of the discussions that's taking place on that platform. Do you think that's a good idea?
It's a great idea. Whether you can get people on board to it, I wish you good luck.
Why would you not want to be involved? Why would a conveyancer not want to be involved in a discussion with you on a platform that's private and safe?
Well, I think, as you well know, I'm a bit like Marmite. You either love me or hate me, and I think some conveyancers will get on with me and some won't. I think that we've discussed this in the past. The conveyancing process is so long drawn out and so unnecessary that it gives people the opportunity to pull out. And I'm still banging the drum. Why aren't we 28-day exchanges like the other places in the world?
Yeah.
I'm all about mental health within the estate agency industry, and I believe that the majority of houses which are being sold at the moment is in forced sales, and that creates a lot of emotion. And as a property broker, I believe that you're more of a counsellor when you're selling it, when you're going through the sales process. Once you've sold it and you've got the buyer for it, then it's he said this and she said that and they've said this and they've said that, and then you're just there to sort of collate as much as you possibly can in the communication, and hope that the conveyancer is going to be relaying the information and being as communicative of what we are. But historically, my last property took 33 weeks to go through. No onward chain, cash buyer. The one before that, 50% mortgage, 50% cash, took 28 weeks to buy a property with no onward chain.
Yeah.
That's just the definition of an insanity. And people are being forced to sell to have to pay debts off and bills, or they could be in domestic abuse relationships. It could be a whole host of reasons. I think you find, and again, not putting everyone into the same category, but estate agents have to be empathetic. If they're not, they've got a problem. Yeah. And there is an issue with caring too much. There's also a problem with communicating too much as well. But the reality is you've got to be able to handle the truth in this industry. And if you can't, then this isn't the job for you.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I like about it is the transparency, that at the moment, the estate agent or the property broker is getting the blame for everything that goes wrong. Mm-hmm. So if the conveyance is slow, you're getting the blame, and it's not your fault. And if you have a safe space where everyone is on the same page, they're in a video conference, they're in a chat group or whatever, then it becomes, the accountability comes off the property broker and goes onto the person that's responsible. So that if the conveyance is not responding, the property broker doesn't get the blame for him not responding. The vendor's in on the conversation, they know that it's the conveyancer that's dragging their feet. So the property broker basically still retains the trust of that vendor. But if it's not open and transparent, then your client is basically saying to you, all of these problems are your fault, and you're not fixing the problem. But if they understand that it's not, I mean, you can tell them it's not your fault, but they're not going to believe you. But if they are involved in the conversation, they know it's not your fault. So you're still maintaining that trust with the client, and it's the conveyancer that's the problem. So that's the thing I like about the transparency of the WigiWan platform. I mean, I don't really want to be on here and promote it. It's a great platform, but that's as far as we'll go with that. I mean, getting back to the question, what do you do? I think again, it's the outcomes that are the problem. The estate agents, the property brokers will say, this is what we do, and it's that end result that they're judged by, rather than the actual process. When the client understands all of the intricacies and all of the roles and responsibilities that a property broker has, they're going to really be a little bit more accommodating in terms of what they're expecting from you. At the moment, that the easy promises come from the estate agent, from the property broker. We can get you the highest price without actually explaining how they're going to do it. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I would say, well, firstly, the highest price isn't always the best buyer. Anyway, is the first thing, because someone could offer you 50 grand more than someone else, but got 3 houses in the chain. So you got to weigh up the odds to whether that's the best client to go with or not. That's the first thing. Obviously, if figures are essential, you're probably going to go wait for the highest offer rather than take the advice of going with the person that's got no chain, that is a lower risk. Now, some people will take that advice and some people won't. Again, it's entirely up to the client. In terms of the transparency side of things, we used to use WhatsApp groups, one group for purchasers, one group for vendors. You couldn't even get a conveyancer to get into that group. And the reason being is because we're getting messages at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 o'clock in the evening. We're also getting messages at 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, because we sell houses abroad as well now, and they're on a different time scale. We're not a 9 till 5 industry. We're an eat, sleep, breathe, repeat business. That is it.
But there's a record there of the conversation.
Well, yeah, there's a record there.
Would you rather there not be a record?
Pardon?
Would you rather there not be a record there?
Oh, absolutely. I'd rather there be one there.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, 100%. But the point is, Chris, is I'm going to ask you now. Just point a finger at me now, as if you were pointing at something. How many fingers are pointing back at you?
None.
3 of them. Right? You're going to get the blame for the majority of things when it comes down to it, because we're the only ones that you can get that they can get in contact with.
Sorry to interrupt. What I'm saying about the group is that if the vendor and the conveyancer and the property broker and anyone else is involved in the group, it's not a matter of pointing fingers. It's a matter of saying, okay, well, you're the person accountable for that, and what's the problem? So there's a dialogue and an open conversation, as opposed to basically pointing fingers.
Well, yes, but there's also the other thing that I think plays a big part in this as well, is everyone loves free advice, but not everyone takes free advice. And the difference is, with a conveyancer or a solicitor, you typically pay them an instruction fee or an upfront charge to start the work, right? So you've already committed to some form of payment. Now, there'll be some property brokers that will charge a marketing cost up front. Some don't. The ones that don't will soon realise it's a good idea to start doing it, because the people who pull out, it costs a lot of money after a period of time when they've done it a few times. Because obviously there's no obligation to pay. Like say, if you're an agent that doesn't do a contract and you can instruct me, and if I don't do the job well enough, you're more than welcome to cancel me off, then so be it. I'm pretty confident that if someone's going to do that at the very beginning, they'd probably just save me a massive headache along the lines. So, with this whole pointing fingers, it's easy to point fingers. I mean, crikey, I've done it plenty of times in the past, just accept the fact that you might have made a mistake. But the reality is the communication is, we live in this world now where people don't talk, they text and they email. And in an emotive transaction, and a stressful transaction or a stressful role, or not necessarily even in the property business, it may even be in their own personal life or job, things can be taken in the wrong way and cause then all of a sudden you've got a massive spat going on. You're like, whoa, come on, all we're trying to do is sort this out. All we want to do is move you on to the next chapter. Respectfully, I told you not to use this person, but you wanted to. There's not a lot we can do about it now. We just got to suck it up and get on with it. And as I say, 33 weeks down the line, with a lot of communication of just keeping everyone together, go, listen, we've got a few things going on, but you need to speak to your solicitor. I'm not a conveyancer. I can only just nudge them to say, can you follow that call up? But again, this is the issue. The conveyancers that, or some, again, let's focus on the word some, not all, but some of the conveyancers that turn around and say, I've tried to get in contact with them. What do? You send them an email. Right, well, when he sends you or she sends you an email and you're not around to answer that call, the problem is just, it's almost as if their phones are again, some, the phones are made of fire and they can't pick them up. It's like, pick the phone up, make the call. What do you need from me? Because I've got a client that's going absolutely crazy here. right? I've been called mental. I've been called a lot worse. The client's going crazy here because they can't understand why we've opted to go with a cash buyer and why it's taken so long to go for it. Now,
But
go on.
I was going to say, in terms, you've said, you're making phone calls and emails. If your client, the vendor, was in on those conversations and understood that you hadn't made a phone call, you hadn't made an email, because you'd actually put the message on the group, and everyone within the group could actually see that message and respond to it. It wouldn't be a matter of you having to defend yourself and saying, well, I've sent an email, blah, 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 blah. The client can actually see what you've done.
Well, again, it comes down to trust, doesn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, in communication. I mean, at the end of the day, like I said in I think our first podcast we did, I can, within 3 days, I can have the filming set and done on a property. 10 days of marketing in a price guide. I'm a big price guide person. I know some people don't like them, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm getting over asking prices and well over asking prices and exceeding my clients' expectations. And I was always taught to under promise and over deliver. So if someone has a problem with my pricing strategy yet my vendors are still happy, well, as far as I'm concerned, that's their own business. Like I said, that's just a competition. We'll have their own opinions. Mm-hmm. But for me, in terms of doing the job properly, I can turn around and say, well, look, as you well know, I had the job done within 13 days from market. Yeah. It's now with the conveyancer. And as you're communicating with your clients won't have a problem with you. It's if you're not communicating with them. And going back to putting the clients into the WhatsApp group, yeah. Well, I never had a WhatsApp group with the client and the conveyancer, to be honest, anyway. So I can't comment. I've had a mortgage broker in there once, which, to be fair, caused more damage than good, if I'm honest. And yeah, I just think, again, Chris, we've heard it before. It's not a one glove fits all process. That's the problem. You might have a house that's got an extra piece of land that hasn't been that isn't on a title. You might have a house that's grade 1 listed. You might have a grade 2 listed property. You might have a star listed property. You might have a house with an agricultural tie. You might have, there's a whole host of things that could possibly be an issue to why things aren't going through. But the reality is, as I said to you before, when you're sitting in someone's living room and you're shaking someone's hand to say, right, I'm going to sell your house for you. And when you go, right, the deal's been accepted, I'm going to shake your hand and I'm going to make sure this goes through. But you need to work with me, not against you, because we will work.
Yeah, that applies to the conveyancers and the property brokers as well. And at the moment, as an observer, it seems like a battle or a war. The property brokers, the estate agents are basically saying it's the conveyancer's fault, and the conveyancers really are just ignoring it. And I don't see the sort of collaboration that will make the process more efficient. And it's a question that just come to mind, that does the conveyancer not care about the transaction? Does he, he's either got his fee or he's going to get his fee. Does he not care about getting the thing over the line?
I wouldn't necessarily say care. I think they naturally would care. I think it's
urgency.
I think the way you have to look at it is if you're not aware of the process or gone through the process. So I'll give you an example, right? I can imagine most conveyancers probably bought a house in the past, have done it relatively seamlessly if they're doing it for themselves, right? Or they've got someone that's doing it. It probably doesn't take as long, or if it does, they might understand the frustration. But for us as the property broker or the estate agent, I'm both. We are there to make sure that the job is as smooth as possible for them. That's it. And the thing is I've recommended the same conveyancer for years, and actually sometimes I give them a little bit extra myself personally if they do it quickly, right? And I've had houses when I've had a buyer say, well, I'll pay this amount of money, but I want it to go through in this amount of time. And I go, okay, well, what's the time scale? And they go 5 days. I'm like, okay, that's going to be a bit risky, but we'll give it a go. And we've done it in 3. Now, I'm not going to turn around and say we can do that with every single transaction, and I'm not stupid enough to do so. But again, if I could convince the conveyancers just to double their fees, right? as I could convince the property brokers to realise that if you're doing this job for less than £5,000, it really ain't worth the stress, a
Yeah.
transaction. That you should set yourself a minimum fee. You should set the conveyancers should have a minimum fee, way more than what they're charging at the moment, in my personal opinion. And what they should do is allow the estate agents or the property brokers to say, right, opt for your conveyancer, get your searches up and running straight away. So as soon as we've got a buyer for you, our ducks are in a row, and we can speed this process up. Now, I know some of these corporates are now doing this now, and I was speaking to a friend of mine the other day who's a managing director of a corporate, and he said that 30% of some of their transactions are going through that way now. They've also got a land and new homes department. You know, the thing is, you buy a land and new homes department property, you typically put a deposit down for it. You don't typically put a deposit down on a property until you exchange contracts, unless you use the likes of a Gazelle or other products which are similar to them. There's no risk, and as a property broker, you're a risk taker. Every time that you agree a property sale, you've got to hope and pray that the buyer that you opt is a legitimate, honest, told you the truth from the very outset, and has got all the ducks in a row. Because again, if you haven't got all of that and you haven't passed that to the conveyancer, respectfully, Chris, it is your fault as a property broker, because you turned stuff over in drips and drabs.
Yeah, I mean, just sort of interrupting there, because you mentioned that, the risk bearer, and there's a book that I was recommended called The Middleman Economy by Marina Krakowski, and the 6 functions, if you like, or identities of an estate agent or a middleman, basically. It's the bridge, introducing people that don't know each other; the certifier, which is basically a seal of approval; the enforcer, which is making sure that both sides are actually doing what they say they're going to do; and as you say, that the risk bearer, where you're reducing uncertainty; a concierge, which is basically, at the moment, there's a huge amount of information overload, so you're basically taking that information and condensing it into the relevant points for your client; and finally the insulator, which is taking the heat. So you're saying things to the other party that your client perhaps couldn't or wouldn't say. So those roles, are very important, and the risk bearer, reducing that uncertainty is one of the key ones. And you mentioned, it's getting everyone on the same page, getting the communication right, getting the efficiency right, and those are the sort of aspects. I mean, the original question was, what do you do? And it's those roles that, for me, is the key to an estate agent or a property broker getting the instruction, not about, well, I can get you the highest price or I can get you the quickest sale, but about the things that I do, the intangibles, the things that you don't see. These are the things that make me worth my fee.
I think when you go to sell someone's property for the first time and they've never been through the process of selling a property, right? I would say to people that the reality is would you pay 10 grand to someone to sell your property and have it done within 30 days, or would you risk paying half the price but it could take 3 to 4 months? What would you do?
I'd have the first option.
Right. The problem is most people don't have that opportunity to be able to turn around and go, I'm not too sure whether I've got that spare 5 grand, because what they'll do is they'll maximise themselves to get the best price possible, and then they won't think about how much they've got left for the conveyancing process. They won't necessarily think how much they've got left for the estate agency fee, and it's because they're in their own world of buying their next dream, their next chapter, right? So anything else apart, when they see that house, anything in the background is just white noise, right? They've already started to realise, where's my L-shaped sofa going, and I'm going to get my projector screen on that wall, and I can just imagine sitting there cooking at the dinner table and having my Argo, right? It doesn't matter what. Like I said, we don't sell houses. We're there to project manage. We're there to counsel. We're there to be community. We're there to put our arm around people to say, listen, this is the process. Unfortunately, I won't swear, but it's knackered, right? It needs to be fixed. And truthfully, We've been saying it for years. Why don't we have the Scottish system? You make this comment about this, having this fantastic platform with WikiWeb, and fortunate enough for both of us knowing the owners of it, is the opportunity to get people into the same place. If you go and buy a property in Spain, you've all got to actually be physically in the same place to start to exchange. Which then leads me to the next point: is why is it estate agents get paid on completion and not on exchange? Because if a 10% deposit is being put in place with a conveyancers for deposit, why doesn't our fee come out of that on exchange of contracts? Because we're obliged to be paid on exchange of contract, but the fee is actually paid on completion. So my question to a lot of conveyancers is, well, I've sold land in the past, which was basically a non-refundable. I didn't know, the solicitor passed it through, so I assume everything was all okay with it. But I had a case with a client where the solicitor client paid £126,000 straight into the client, to the conveyancer, and then in order to buy a piece of land. And then once the sale of her property come through, then she was going to put the remaining balance, so then she could have her horses, right? Perfectly legitimate, everything was perfectly fine, easily afford the property, even with the money that was going to come from the house sale. But the complications is if people aren't going to communicate with us in a conversation, and I said to you, Chris, I don't hide the fact I'm dyslexic, so I do understand I'm a bit more of a challenge to some people when it comes to being communicative. And I can sort of go around the houses, no pun intended, when I talk to people. But I do live in this world where I'm just like, honestly, I just want to make your life easy, right? You say about the war on estate with the solicitors and conveyancers. It is war. It's weak and ridiculous. It's absolutely fundamentally weak and ridiculous, the fact that conveyancers just don't want to talk to us. Because, and the thing is my argument to the reason why I don't think it's necessarily the right idea for the client to be in the WhatsApp group is because we're being paid a job to do a job. Now the thing is if your client isn't, if your agent isn't doing the right job for you, you should be perfectly in their right to sack them off. But again,
isn't that a positive?
Sorry?
Isn't that a positive that the client can actually see what the agent's doing? So it'll weed out the underperforming agents.
Well, I would say that if I was underperforming and that was an issue, I would say, right, can I just come to your house, right? And I just want to go through and just show you what's happened, right? Make that personal visit to them rather than a phone call. Because, we live in this world now where everyone's a professional in everything until they learn the hard way that they're not. And at the end of the day is if you don't really understand the process and you're prepared to commit yourself to go and pay X amount of money, I say this to people, as a property broker, we're here to manage the shit that's rolling downhill, right? We're here to catch it all. Make sure that we can make this as my clients are like, I don't know what's going on at the end of the day because Rob's got it under control. I don't need to speak to him. He comes recommended. He's done the job. He's got me more money than I asked. He told me to use which conveyancer. They've got a great reputation. We're using those one. No problem at all. The only issue is if you've got a bad performing estate agent, is that you want to know what's going on. So again, so you can't be tarring everyone with the same brush of saying, just like I can't tar every conveyancer with the same brush.
It's a matter of transparency and accountability. So if the transparency is there, the accountability kicks in. But if there's no transparency, so if you don't, or if the client doesn't know what your or their conveyancer is doing, and they have to rely on you to tell them, the accountability basically is with you instead of the conveyancer. And you can say, okay, well, the conveyancer's kicking the heels. It's taken 3 weeks, or it's taken 3 months, and the client's blaming you for the conveyancer being slow. And if they were in the conversation, the three of you were in the group, and the conversation was transparent and honest, it would basically, the accountability would go straight onto the conveyancer and not onto the property broker, so that the client then understands. And instead of saying, I'm going to sack Rob because he's bloody useless, the sale's taking forever, he's then going to say, I'm going to sack the conveyancer because he's useless and Rob's still with me. So you get that accountability and you get that trust and relationship, and it strengthens. So you become bulletproof, and the person that's letting the side down is out the equation. So that has to raise the industry standards, presumably.
I think it would raise the standards to a degree, but again, it's about how communicative and how transparent you've been at the beginning. I mean, if you turn around to them and say, right, I told you to use this conveyancer, you opted not to, so you wanted to use this one, right? The reason why I asked you to use my conveyancer is because I know that they will communicate with me on the timescale which work within for me, which is going to be informative for you. And to be honest with you, Chris, I've actually pulled a transaction from a solicitor before because it took them so long to get the information out. And actually, when I told them, don't send the information out now, we're going to change our solicitors, funny enough, they sent all the information out to the solicitor and it caused even more of a problem. So even when I disinstructed them and their response to me was, well, we thought we could all good, we thought we sent it out. And I said, well, I told you not to. So why did you bother? Mm-hmm. So you've now made my life even more difficult. I won't mention what solicitor it was. I'm not, I don't need to. But I have no problem with drawing something away. But again, it's the communication, the relationship with your client and your vendor. Your vendor is there. If they want to go and point the blame at the property broker, and I'm sure they will, the majority of them. But again, if you can turn around to these people and you say to them initially, I'm going to find you a buyer. I'm going to hope that they're going to have a decent conveyancer. I'm going to do the best I possibly can to keep this together because guess what? As much as I love this job, I still want to get paid at the end. Mm-hmm. Right? So when you talk about these groups, is again going back to a 28-day exchange. If we had a 28-day exchange in place, you wouldn't have to worry about any of this. That's the truth of it. Yeah. The only reason why you're stressed, and I'm going to use the stress because the mental health pandemic within estate agency is the stressful process of everyone pointing fingers to go, oh, it's their fault, or it's their fault, or it's their fault, or someone's lied. And you're like, well, there's only a certain amount that I can do, really. And at the end of the day, if I keep contacting the conveyancer is just going to stand strong and go, I'm not talking to you anymore. I'm like, well, just do what you need to do. So again, it's as you well know, I love my boxing, but with Rocky in the corner as well. Is some people can't handle the truth. Mm-hmm. The reality is, it's your fault. As I say, I spent Friday afternoon in with the solicitor because to inform them that because they hadn't responded back to me, I've informed the SRA now because I've got no idea why it took you 33 weeks to get a property through, and that's the difference between a property broker who's got their name above the door, because my interest is I had to go and sit with my client in a hospital one day because she was so stressed at 81 years old. Couldn't work out for their life was why it's taking so long.
Yeah. But if I was your client in that 33-week transaction, and the communication was from you saying the solicitor or the conveyancer is dragging it out, it's been 33 weeks, I'm sorry, blah 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 blah, and I didn't really understand what was going on, I'd blame you. But if I was in the correspondence, in the communication and the messaging in a private group, I would understand it's not your fault. It's that idiot conveyancer or idiot solicitor or whoever it was. So my relationship with you remains strong. But if I'm not part of the conversation, then I'm basically going to blame you.
Well, that's fine. You can do. I've got no problem with that. You blame me as much as you like. But all I've got to do is just come to you and say, hey, Chris, you're free for half an hour on Tuesday.
But if you're a great agent, just a minute. Agent doing your job, and I'm blaming you, that's my bad. Basically, well,
you're just uneducated on it.
Yeah. Which is going back to the question that we started with, what do you do? And it's been great talking to you and finding out what a property broker actually does. And as I say at the start, it's not just selling a house. It's all those things in there. And then that becomes into the fee. How can people do all that work for zero fee or for a £500 or £1,000? It becomes basically just a transaction, and it's done with digitally and no sort of care and involvement in it. So I think perhaps the next topic we talk about next week is probably the fees that estate agents charge. I mean, that's another contentious issue, and we can have another session on that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think again, you talk about the agents that do this for X amounts of money. I agree. I think, but when you first set your business up, you need to do something in order to get it. And most agents go, "Oh, sell your house for £1,000 because if you sell it to someone who's got a house for sale, then you're going to get probably another 4 or 5 grand or 6, 7, 8, 10 grand fee in order off the back of it. So as long as you've got a chain involved, that £1,000 becomes 10 grand. It depends on how you manage the transaction. In terms of doing a thing on fee, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do a thing on fee because agents or estate agents should be training their property brokers to say, yes, you're going to get 98% of the house sale. I'm going to be taking 2% of it, right? You shouldn't have a fear of being able to say that, do you respect me to get the most amount of money for you and reward me at the end of it? Or should I just charge you 1% and then we'll agree a fee, a price, and if I get over that amount of money, then you'll charge me 10%. I'll charge you 10% of over each amount. So you can structure a fee in any way that you like. In terms of this whole process, is I think the issue is if you are being misinformed, and like I say, you want to blame someone to do for it, and yes, it might be your bad, but actually my response would be no, it's actually my bad because I haven't explained to you enough what I'm doing. So
Yeah.
again, it's not if you've had a bad experience with an estate agent and they're not communicative with it, and I say, I know with yourself, with your agent, you've got a fantastic relationship with them, so you know exactly what's going on.
Mhm.
But that 33-week process in my situation, if we go back to that quickly, is my vendor knew that I'd done everything I possibly can, and it was completely out of my hands. Right? She had, it was solely down to the creative. But again, that's communication. It's been responsive. I just, as soon as it was a question, I'm straight on the phone. Let's get this resolved. Do you need me to pop over and see you? Got no problem. I'll come and see you. It's this job is a people person business. This isn't a digital transaction. It can be done digitally. I'm not saying it can't be, but it really, whilst we're still in this ridiculous time plans that it takes to get houses through, it is a people business where someone needs to be at the end of the phone because they're gambling with the most amount of money that they're ever going to participate in spending, and they want to know that they trust the person you deal. And I play on it anyway. I know I don't look like the most typical estate agent, and you ain't going to get me in a suit, right? Because I'm not the same as everyone else. I am a property broker. I'm not an well, I am an estate agent as well because it's my business. But understand the difference between what a property broker does and what a conveyancer does. And I would seriously encourage people to look at Google reviews and reviews on their conveyancers, pre-instructing them, because you'll get a good feeling of actually how good they are, rather than just taking the estate agent or the property broker's advice.
Yeah.
So, as I say, I think this is a phenomenal conversation in regards to, and it could go on for hours. This, to be brutally honest, because, like I say, every transaction is completely different. You might end up with trying to deal with a management company. That could be an issue. It's if people instructed conveyancers at the beginning before they instructed the estate agent. I know that could be slightly detrimental to some because some conveyancers don't like certain estate agents. But for me, if I was to say, right, cool, I've been to see you, I've appraised your property, what's your next step now? Okay, well, you need to go to your conveyancer now to instruct one, and these would be the three that I would suggest to look at in your area because they're the ones I know, and you're going to get a good service from them, and they're going to be communicative with you, and you're not going to have to worry about what's going on. That is the way I work. The problem is because we're ready within literally weeks, when these other agents are taking 3, 4, 5, 6 months to go through because they haven't done their due diligence, mine's sitting there going, what the hell's going on?
I mean, to me, that's a good selling point. It's not a unique selling point, but it's a really good selling point in terms of if you're going to picture a market appraisal, those are the sort of things you can bring into it and saying, okay, well, we've got this group around us, we've got a conveyancer, we've got a solicitor, we've got the removal companies, everyone is within our group, and the communication between everyone within that group is first class, and that really is one of the benefits of working with me. It's not a transaction. Everyone is committed. The fees are higher. The conveyancers charge more. The solicitors charge more. I charge more. But you've got that assurance and credibility that everyone is at the top of their game, and that's a selling point, if you like, that everyone is working together in a community, and it's just increasing the efficiency of the whole process. And it's a transparent group. If anyone steps out of line, everyone else knows about it.
Yeah, I mean, just actually on that, when you talk about the WhatsApp group, are you talking about the buyer being included in that group as well?
Yeah.
Yes, that's dangerous, Chris.
Oh, sorry, no, the seller, the vendor, but not the buyer.
Okay, well, does that mean that you should have another group for the buyer as well then?
I haven't really thought that through. I guess it, like you say, it's a bit dangerous having the buyer in there, but I think they can be brought into the group at the right stage. I mean, if you're going to be the enforcer and ensure that everyone is agreeing to what they said they would do, it makes sense to have the buyer in there. So explain to me some of the situations where the buyer perhaps shouldn't be in the conversation.
Could you cut out the transaction? You don't get paid.
Again?
You don't get paid. The problem you have is
the agent.
No, some people don't have a moral compass, right? And the truth of it is when a buyer and a seller get the opportunity. I have one rule for my vendors, and I say to my vendors and my buyers, once we've agreed the transaction sale, I'm happy to take you around the property a couple more times if you want me to go take you around there. But after that, the reason why I'm taking you around is because I don't want you and the seller communicating with each other pre-exchange of contracts.
Yeah.
After exchange, talk as much as you like. But the thing is when the buyer's phoning their conveyance and they're saying, "Oh well, I'm trying to get hold of the seller's solicitor, and I can't get hold of them," and the seller's then saying exactly the same thing, and then you're stuck in this situation where you are literally just fighting fire because basically you're out of the loop, and then once you're out of the loop, you've got literally, like I said, you're then stuck in a 28 to 33 week contract period of trying to get something through because they don't listen. And the thing is at that point you go, well, Joe, what? I told you this was going to happen. You didn't listen. I've now got to wait 3-6 months to go and get paid because I've agreed to sell this property to you and you didn't listen to me. So yeah, I think fundamentally, actually, I mean, you used the word Purple Bricks. Actually, I think Purple Bricks actually had a platform at one point where the buyers and the sellers could communicate with each other to skip out the estate agent.
Yeah.
Which, again, why on earth, right? Not only have you just smashed the estate agency industry by doing £1,000 instructions, as it were, you've now just completely knackered the process by saying that you can get the buyers and the sellers to communicate with people. And I'll tell you this now, Chris. I've had to jump on as someone who was selling with one of these agents once before and actually had to do the work for them because they had no idea what was going through. They're going through a divorce. My client was a good friend of mine. We were buying their property. And my pal just said to me, he said, "Look, Rob, can you just phone this?" But the seller has asked if you would speak to him because he doesn't know what the problem is. Can you? I was like, "Yeah, of course." And then he took it on. I actually took the train. I didn't get paid for it. I got paid for selling my property. So
I think there's an argument for keeping the buyer and the seller apart until exchange. But once the process is exchanged, then bring them together, which is going to speed up the efficiency.
Yeah, 100%, Chris. Once you've exchanged contracts, like I say, my contract, I'm obliged to be paid on exchange of contracts once it's there. So, let's say, I'm just trying to make my life. I lost my hair at 25 anyway from doing this job. So, the job, we only give the advice not to make life more difficult for us. We're doing it to try and make it easier for them. Yeah. But again, it goes back to the reputation. We don't trust estate agents or property brokers, but we trust a conveyancer or a solicitor because they went to university. Yeah. And the majority of the estate agents that I know didn't go to university, right? Because they weren't that sort of way of people. They were people. They weren't there about doing the paperwork and writing their figures down and doing their targets. They were like, right, what's the next deal?
Yeah. And I think trust is going to be one of the topics in the future. Obviously, it's something really dear to my heart. But I think that the trust comes from the transparency. And I think if the vendor and the property broker and the conveyancer are all in this group together and communicating together, and then you bring in the buyer and you're bringing in people like Gazelle and it's all done in a very safe platform, I think that's going to increase the trust and the efficiency of the whole process. So I mean, a state agency is not a perfect business. There are, lots of things that can be improved, and there's a lot of people who are trying not to make it better because they're happy with the way things are. And I think, it's a matter of getting the people who are passionate about changing this industry for the better and getting the conversations out there. So the chat to you today has been very enlightening for me. I don't claim to know anything really about the process of selling a house. I'll leave it to guys like you and to Asif and to their solicitors and conveyancers. But it's been great, Rob. I really, as I say, appreciate the conversation. Is there anything you'd like to sort of wrap up on in terms of what do you do?
Oh, I really appreciate the chat as well, and I think it's good for us to get this out there. These are questions which I think a lot of people possibly ask, and if funds are tight and you can't necessarily afford an expensive estate agent or a conveyancer, or you'll realise that actually the expense will be your mental health will be the highest expense by not paying that bit more money and allowing your negotiator or your property broker to deal with the negotiation and actually the onward purchase. As I say, we don't just hear, we negotiate on as well. I've said it before, just to wrap this up, but if you need to get £1 million and you're buying at 1.5, is there any difference in selling at 900 and buying at 1.4?
Mm-hmm.
Because actually the reality is you're actually slightly better off because your stamp duty should be slightly lower. So I believe the estate agency industry is broken, but the only reason why it's broken is because people just don't have the mental capacity to take so long to go through the conveyancing process now.
Yeah.
And that isn't me saying it's all the conveyancing before. That's me saying that there are brokers out there that don't send all the information across in one lump sum to them. You've got some conveyancers that jump up and go, don't do searches, let us do our search. And right, listen, I'll give you £200 if you want the commission for it, right? It's going to be easier for me to get them done myself. It's a greed thing. And I actually think we should be actually looking at capping the amount of transaction the conveyancer should actually be allowed to take on in a month, as opposed to just taking them on and taking them on and taking them on. And again, that's another conversation maybe we can have with a conveyancer that wants to jump on board with it. But yeah. I don't know the conveyancing process. I've been through it, but I'm here to assist. And if someone can tell me the reasons why 28-day exchange is not beneficial, then I'll welcome on board for a chat.
Yeah, great. Rob, it's been fantastic. I mean, it sort of brings to mind something I heard probably 6 months ago from one of the agency trainers, and it was about being a property expert and being charming and polite and professional and polished. And to me, one of the words that you use a lot is persistence. And it's like, a terrier or a dog with a bone, you're going on snapping at their ankles and really chasing the details down. And I think that's where the results come from. And I've learned a lot more about you in the 3 conversations that we've had in terms of what makes a great estate agent, not a better estate agent, but a great estate agent. And there is that perception in the industry, not in the industry, with the consumers, that estate agency is really a commodity sector. And it's important for agents to really define their identity, whether you're going to become that polished, perfected and charming estate agent who tries to persuade people to your way of thinking, or whether you're actually like you, that persistent person who is really going to chase down the detail and get the result at the end. Robert, again, it's been great talking to you, and thanks for your time, and have a great week.
I'll speak to you soon, mate.
Thanks, my friend. Take care.